They were the must-have tech treasures of their day that propelled us into modern life and got us from A to B in cutting-edge style. Until we traded them in for the latest and greatest.
Technology is moving very quickly.
But some are still worth a spin.
They still make records?
Just don't get too attached, because what's new will soon be old.
They still make CDs?
Now, Retro Tech on Modern Marvels. The digital revolution triggered the decline of many technologies, most notably the vinyl LP. From the 50s to the 70s, perhaps no single possession was more treasured by American teenagers than their collection of vinyl records. Records on turntables and in jukeboxes provided the soundtrack to our most cherished memories. Perhaps you or your parents fell in love to the music being played on one of these. First, 8-track tapes, and then cassettes challenged vinyl's reign. But it was this digitally encoded piece of plastic that ultimately toppled the records regime. By the mid-'80s, the recording industry virtually stopped releasing on vinyl. Of course, if history teaches us anything, it's that what goes around often comes around. Since the turn of the 20th century, audiophiles have been grooving to the rich sounds of needle on record. Rainbo Records in Canoga Park, California, has been pressing vinyl discs since 1955.
At the time, we were probably making around 6,000 to 8,000 pieces a day. In the 60s, we got much larger, and we were in the neighborhood of 30,000 to 40,000 records a day. Our heyday was in '77 when Elvis died. Within 3 days, Elvis's death, we were pressing 60,000 records a day, 7 days a week.
By the late 80s, Rainbo was back down to pressing 8,000 to 10,000 vinyl records per day. But thanks to loyal listeners and avid collectors, records never completely went extinct. And today, something interesting is happening.
We are presently pressing close to 25,000 a day, 6 days a week. There's definitely a resurgence in vinyl.
Creating a vinyl record has always been part science, part mechanics, part craft. The modern method has its share of high-tech tweaks, but the basics have endured. In a studio, music is recorded as sound waves onto magnetic tape, or digital medium. Those sound patterns are fed into a computer-controlled lathe, where a heated sapphire tip cuts a continuous spiral groove into the surface of a lacquer-covered aluminum disc. The groove is a mechanical translation of the frequency and amplitude of the sound waves. Low bass tones produce a wide groove, while higher frequencies are narrower. Next, the lacquer is sent to Rainbo for duplication.
We're going to spray it with silver, and then we're going to hang it into a tank and build a nickel surface on it.
The silver coating makes the surface conductive to electricity, allowing a current to pass through, and the nickel to adhere to it through electroplating.
Then we're going to separate the two pieces, and then you had a positive, and now you have a negative.
The A and B side negatives, called the master, are placed back in the electroplating tank to create positives, called the mother. From the mother, up to 40 pairs of negative stampers, which will press the final records, can be made before quality degrades. Now science gives way to the mechanics and craft of record making.
This is a record press. We have two labels, two stampers which have the information on it. We glue the stamper onto the mold, so you got an A side and a B side. You got an A side and a B side label.
Workers pour PVC pellets into the machine, where they're melted and formed into a malleable puck that will become the disc.
The polyvinyl chloride, or PVC, is about 330 degrees. The press is about 330 degrees when it closes. Goes under 1,800 pounds of pressure. And it squeezes out, and it's kind of like making a waffle. Instead of pouring in batter, we're pouring in vinyl.
About 30 seconds later, the formed disc emerges on the other side.
After the record gets pressed and it gets cooled down, it comes out to the trimming station, and the trimming station trims off the excess. This excess will recycle and use again once the record is trimmed, that record is finished, other than quality control and packaging.
By contrast, Rainbo makes CDs, about 100,000 a day, in sterile-looking rooms on the other side of the factory. Industry-wide, CD's market share has been dwindling, thanks in large part to digital downloads, and in small part to the resurgence of vinyl. It's not just the classics that live on vinyl. Today's big-selling artists are back on the turntable, and the kids are finding out what their parents already knew.
There's audiophile guys who are still buying records, but what's really driving it today is 13 to 24-year-olds who have discovered this new thing called a record. You know, people always ask you what you do for a living, and I would always say, you know, I make CDs and records, and I would always hear, they still make records? And, you know, I tell them how many we make, and they're always amazed. Recently, I was at a party sitting at a table, and same conversation, I said we make records, CDs, and the comment back to me was, they still make CDs?